These videos are about regular people talking about the things that divide us, immigration, race, Trump, etc., so they might offend you. But I hope they're useful, like some videos I made about home repairs that helped thousands of people. You see, I hate doing my own home repairs. I don't want to listen to a professional home repair guy who makes it look easy. TV pundits give me the same vibe. I don't want to listen to these people. When you see them on TV, they're at work. It's their job to talk about this stuff. They're not really interested in learning from each other and fixing the problem. They sure don't ask the questions I would ask. So me and my brother, who is himself progressive, we drove to 22 cities and interviewed dozens of people who support progressive causes. And I learned this. It's our feelings that divide us. Feelings driven by personality. Some of us want to be the innovators, the trusting, the idealists. Some of us want to be the managers, the cautious, the realists. And each of us builds a fortress around our feelings that you can't break through with facts and arguments. But maybe we shouldn't try. Apparently, evolution or God or whatever made us this way for a purpose. I think that purpose is that we need each other to get the full picture. I know it works that way with other things. But we have to talk to each other. If we don't talk to each other, we won't make progress. We drove next to San Francisco and talked to Matt Cahill, a business training professional whose opinions on immigration in the age of Trump are especially of interest to me because in his work he delivers programs on unconscious bias to large organizations, and in his personal life he has firsthand experience on the challenges of immigrating to the U.S. He's also participating in the Bridging the Divide effort by San Francisco Church to have moderated discussions between conservatives and liberals.
I'm a business consultant, and I deliver learning and development workshops around unconscious bias and help companies with employee engagement programs. I'm also a member of Glide Memorial, which is one of the more progressive Methodist churches in the Bay Area in San Francisco. Together with some other members, we wanted to put some structure and create space so that liberals and conservatives can come together and just have a meaningful dialogue. So the program is called Bridging the Divide, and it's designed to bring people together and have a facilitated dialogue around relatively sensitive topics that usually are divisive. But here, the goal isn't to change anybody's mind, but it's just to, hear where people are coming from.
Okay, great. Do you think income inequality is a problem in this country?
I think income inequality is a problem around the world, not just in this country.
Would you be more comfortable if our economic system or the world's economic system was more based on, something where people shared the wealth, whatever they might call that nowadays?
I don't know that I'd want to throw capitalism. That's like, putting the baby out with the bathwater. I think that there's a lot of benefits from capitalism. The nature of capitalism allows people to really embrace this, sometimes it's referred to as the dark side, like where you want to win. Like there's something I think wired into both men and women, this just hardwired natural competition. Like I'll win at all costs. It's and when we put it into boxes, it's perfectly fine, right? Like we call it sport, right? And depending on the rules of the game, it's just magnificent, and it's a beauty to watch. So people who are not only engaged in the activity are benefiting, but then it's also benefiting society as a whole because we become communal creatures around it and celebrate the victories, and often it becomes part of our identity as a spectator. I mean, go to any football game and you see people who are, if their team loses, man, they're genuinely crushed. So I think that part of capitalism, I think, is magnificent. But when you start to peel away that onion, when you get into the rules that favor certain people over others, and that's where it gets messy. And that's where I think part of the divide happens.
Would you describe the things that you're not satisfied about in capitalism, if that's a fair question?
I think when there were many variables that went into play with the 2008 economic meltdown. Mm-hmm. And it really impacted the lives of, all across the board. Wealthy, upper middle class, below middle class, poor people especially. The way that that was handled is an example of how I don't think that the government did enough to really make sure that, the people who were really exploiting the rules of the game were properly punished. It's like in a football game, if somebody, completely, intentionally clips somebody and it severed their spine, that person should not be able to play again. And that's effectively what a lot of these large financial institutions did. This is where I think it's important to distinguish between intent and impact. And when you get down to an individual level, I think either liberal or conservatives, the intent of their thoughts and actions may be very wholesome and it may be very noble in some cases. But if the impact of their action or that policy or that, program is to harm people, then that needs to be the measure for what's done about it.
I like the fact that in this country we tend to go back and forth between big governments and small governments. And now I believe the pendulum is turning towards small government. And you guys progressives are calling foul over that. And I'm saying, hey guys, we waited out Obama, can't you wait out Trump? He's our guy. He's pushing things in a direction that we really like, after you guys have had a chance to push things in a direction that you really liked. And I think that's good for the country. I wish people wouldn't call us Nazis and fascists for saying that. Why do you think so many people are just so upset about the Trump administration that they're saying that this is unprecedented? I know as a guy he's unprecedented. He's like Andrew Jackson on steroids, right? He just does not adhere to any of the preconceptions, which we'll grant that, right? But, really, are we going to start saying that, we got to resist and we got to throw monkey wrenches into the system? Oppose it for sure, but throw monkey wrenches into it? That seems like what's going on.
Well, I think if I'm really trying to be unbiased or fair, Trump calls those wrenches upon himself.
Yeah, you're right. He certainly does troll
people. He
people.
got into office by saying, I'm going to drain the swamp.
Yeah.
I'm going to, I'm going to do things like nobody else has ever done them before. And that appealed to people who were, I think, hurting. Yeah. Because a lot of folks, who voted for him are living in communities that are just decimated by not Obama, but by 40 to 50 years of automation and technological advances and globalization and so all these buzzwords that I think Trump was very savvy in how he used them to get the support he needed to get into office.
So then I'm glad you brought up globalization. What did you think about the whole, this started with the first George W. Bush. We're going to go to a global economy. How do you think that's worked out?
Well, I don't know that it was really originating from George Bush. He may have said that, and that's, but I think he said that as the plane was in flight already. Globalism started when the auto manufacturers left Michigan in the 1970s. Yeah. That's where I grew up. I watched it just fall apart around me, and in high school looking around and thinking, wow, I can't go get a job at the factory when I graduate. I have to do something different. Mm-hmm. It's not available to me. It's just not an option. Mm-hmm. When people hear and say globalism or nationalism, they hear things that they fill in the gaps. You know what I mean? And it means something. And I think with globalism, there's like an economic component where in a capitalistic society or a business or a capitalistic economy, people want to produce goods at the lowest possible cost and sell them for as much as they can. Mm-hmm. And, you can do that with the technological advances by building them in, let's just use China. Sure. Could have been South Korea, could have been Mexico, could have been any number of different countries, but far less than what they were capable of doing that here. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that that's going to change.
Well, I remember when this first started happening, people were saying, hey, yeah, it's going to be a global economy. And so I read all the best guys defending it and the guys who were against it. The guys defending it, the best guys defending it said, there's going to be some local pain. Well, 35 years later, local pain, my goodness. You've witnessed it up front. Local pain, but they said, but in return, we'll all get cheaper prices. And I don't care that I can order batteries for next to nothing from Amazon. I would rather have friends and neighbors who have jobs and, no opioid epidemic and no tremendous, rust belt that's getting worse and worse every year. I just think we've kind of lost sight of what the purpose of a government was. They almost sounded like they were doing the bidding of a larger world made up of the folks that own these companies rather than the citizenry of their own country. So that's where I don't like globalism. And I think that's where Trump voters are coming from. It's like, when Trump says, hey, we're making these deals and we're making these deals badly and we're getting ripped off and no NAFTA and no TPP and all that, I think it resonates with people. I guess my question was, do you think nationalism that you see that Trump is promoting, do you think that's a bad thing?
Yeah, this is where my bias will come in. I've yet to really see things that Trump promotes that I'm really, in favor of or I get really excited about. But
okay.
Most of that is based on, I don't think he's a very effective leader.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really hard for me to discern, what's real when it's just, how does one lead the free world? Like America is like America's police. If we're the free leader of the free world, if we're these things, how do you do that through Twitter? And that's how he's doing it. So I guess I'm learning how he's doing it, but it's just, it baffles me. Again, I don't think he understands the impact versus what his intent. Maybe it is noble, right? But when you tweet things out that are harmful to people, mm-hmm. and bring us closer to perhaps war with North Korea, that to me, it frightens me.
Yeah.
Your question is about nationalism and what that means.
To me, it's, economic, I should say. I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the idiots with the tiki torches.
But even so, in my mind, nationalism is somebody who has a love for country, mm-hmm. like an educated citizenry. Mm-hmm. Those are the concepts that kind of are unpacked when I start to think about nationalism. And it means, it means immigration. It means immigrants. It means a nation of immigrants. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean like white adult male. But mm-hmm. that's, I think, the idea of what an American is. Still, in most people's mind, is a white male. Mm-hmm. And America just isn't just that. I think it's partly that, but It's just not that.
So it sounds like you're saying this appeal to nationalism does sound like it's a bit racist. It's a bit othering other people. Is that kind of the vibe you're getting from the Trump administration? They're othering people in this quest for nationalism?
Yeah.
Or for renewed nationalism?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think in my experience, in my work and in conversation and friends and social discourse and just in my experience of the world, many people of color don't identify as with nationalism. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the conversations I have been more around how there hasn't been the same benefit extended to them that there has been for white folks. Mm-hmm. There is something to that. And there is something to recognizing that and just acknowledging that. Mm-hmm. And even when you start to look historically through that lens, it becomes almost undeniable. I mean, the founding fathers, mm-hmm. all white men. Mm-hmm. Women were never written into it. But okay. I think, we're fortunate to live in a country where we can have this conversation, mm-hmm. and really with the intent of making it a better place for you and I to live and for our children to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is a kind of a structural racism that if we haven't gotten past that, you're a little hinky on the whole idea of nationalism when nationalism smacks a little too much of white supremacy. Is it kind of like that? when people really rile at the notion of make America great again, especially the again part, because it's like, guys, do you not remember what we were like? Now, to me, I'm like, hey, I remember what it was like. I remember there was a lot less unwed mothers, that there's a lot more job security, a lot more people had pensions. There's a lot of good things about that. Everybody knows what idiots we were when it came to race and views about women in the workplace and at home and all that kind of stuff. We all know that by now. And so I don't think there's any doubt when most people are thinking about Make America Great, we're talking about the good things, not the idiocy about race, not the discrimination. So the idea of nationalism, this whole Make America Great kind of a motif that Trump is promulgating, it makes you feel a little uncomfortable because historically we have had structures in place that will not give opportunity to everybody of all races, creeds, etc. It is kind of a given advantage to white folks. Is that kind of where you're coming from on that? When I talk about nationalism?
I think it is, because I get uncomfortable because I think that's what Trump means when he says, make America great again. In his mind, and I think in a lot of the minds of the constituents, it is, back to this era of unwed mothers. And there's some preconceived idea that they have that is very attractive. And it's almost like a longing for a nostalgia of what this, what the world was like. And let's try to get back to that.
Right.
But you can't go back in time.
Well, it is a nostalgia. Let me explain the attraction of the nostalgia, okay? I think it's not about race. I think it's completely about culture. And I think during the 60s, we broke down a lot of barriers, which is fantastic. But one of the barriers we broke down was sex. So it led to a tremendous amount of unwed mothers, whites, blacks, all cultures now, much more unwed mothers than we saw before. So that nostalgia is a nostalgia for when 50% of all Caucasian births were not for unwed mothers, where 75% of all African American births weren't to unwed mothers, where 80% of all black households weren't in a single mother environment. That's the nostalgia we're going for, when those things weren't epidemic. I don't think it's unfair to say that we were much better off, before we tried all these grand experiments that sounded good but have ended up having a catastrophic effect on social cohesion in this country.
So in your mind, is it based on social variables or are these economic variables?
It's 100% culture. It's 100% cultural. The Nigerians that come here, the West Indies that come here, they're a race that are, that's different than Caucasian, but they come from a culture in which, I mean, goodness, Nigerians come with, 17% of them come with master's degrees to this country, and they do extraordinarily well economically. So yeah, would we be better served by talking about culture instead of talking about race?
I think that depends. Mm-hmm. I think culture is less threatening. I think culture is easier topic for most people to talk about. Mm-hmm. Race is just inherently volatile. It's inherent. It's something that people aren't comfortable. I think people need to get a deeper understanding about race at a very high level. If you're in a mixed company and race comes up, I think white people at some level always feel defensive because they don't want to be perceived as being racist. Mm-hmm. Most white people. And people of color, especially when you start to realize that it's not just black and white. There's so many different nuances that are underneath race that to just eliminate it as a topic of discussion is, it's like just trying to put your head in the sand. Like
I agree wholeheartedly.
It's not going to do anybody any good.
Yeah, you remember when Eric Holder said we're a nation of cowards when it comes to race? I absolutely, wholeheartedly agree with that. I cannot believe that we do not have, kind of frank discussions about that. Do you think all cultures are equally praiseworthy?
Oh. Do I think all cultures are equally praiseworthy?
See, and the gotcha nature of this is I want to try to understand. You had strong opinions about immigration, and I do as well. I don't like some of the stuff that's happening in this country because people from other cultures are coming here and bringing some of what I would think are, what's the word, dysfunctions, some of the dysfunctions of their culture to our culture, and that worries me. So that's why I ask you, do you think all cultures are equally praiseworthy? And do you think it's legitimate to have a fear that if we don't moderate our intake of people coming from other cultures who do not want to assimilate, and have stated, the days of the melting pot are over. This is more of a salad bowl. This is more of a cultural diversity environment. Do you think it's a legitimate fear to say, well, I fear for the national kind of, social fabric?
I think it's fears are fears. They're and to categorize them as legitimate or illegitimate, it almost doesn't make sense, because it just is. Like, you feel something. Feelings aren't rational.
You're right.
You know what I mean? It's sort of put a rational characteristic onto a feeling is.
Oh, okay. Well, what word do you want to use for something that will make you decide how to vote? Because that's what I'm talking about.
I thought you were talking about people coming into this country and bringing unwanted practices.
Right, bringing unwanted practices. And I think that's why Trump won the election, because there's enough people who are so scared to death that because of, we've tried this grand experiment where back in '65 we decided, instead of taking, immigrants based on how much they contributed, we would based on who was more deserving. So, all Cambodian, Vietnam, all kinds of things. The Ted Kennedy Act in 1965 that basically changed it. Now it's more difficult if you're like a pediatrician in Britain. Good luck coming to this country, because we just do not give priority to people who are British. We would give priority to people who are from emerging nations now. So that, plus the fact that there are illegal immigrants who are coming primarily from the South, who are coming from emerging nations. If people come from Canada, good for them, because that's not an emerging nation. That's a place that generally shares our cultural values, right? But people are going to hate me for saying this, but I recall being in a line at Disneyland, and we were all trying to buy something, and there were a bunch of people there from a different culture, where if you wanted to get something, it was whoever could push to the front of the line first. Now, that was their culture. I suppose some people would say I didn't have a right to criticize it, but I was like, gosh, guys, you're in America now. We don't push and shove to get into the front of a line at Disneyland. So is it a legitimate fear to say, I think something's going wrong if we don't pay attention to, what Thomas Jefferson called the American, what is unique to being America? We should be the best and brightest. We should have the best of attributes.
Wow, that's a lot you're covering there, man. That's a lot of ground.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a lot, and I'm sorry if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine.
No, I'm happy to. I just don't know where to pick it apart, because you were covering a lot.
Okay, sorry.
I think an equal example of American, and it's not a good representation, but like on the day after Thanksgiving, when you have people trampling each other to go in and buy crap that they really don't need.
Yeah.
I think that's a symptom. That's a manifestation of both our capitalism, our just unbridled, sickness in many ways. I mean, we're addicted to a lot of things in this country that we don't really acknowledge. And one of them is just this mass overconsumption. It's part of the way that we feed our economy. Just consume. The other piece that you started talking about was, like people coming here with not everybody wants to be here. And I don't even know that Canadians that I've had conversation with share American cultural values. In Canada, my perception of it, maybe this isn't reality, there's a lot more common good. And I think that's reflected in their institutional policies, where the narrative in America, we're in love with individualism. We're in love. I mean, that's cowboys, right? Like that's just part of our DNA as American history and American narratives are very, very much around the individual.
And I guess that's the thing. I mean, everybody loves to celebrate culture, right? Except that one. I mean, you even pointed out there's some bad things about our consumerism. You're right. There's dysfunction in our society. That's for sure. But it's like, this thing that made us distinctly Americans, in such a way that everybody wanted to be like us and they listened to our music and they wanted to come to America. By and large, a lot of people want to come here, right? Is that worth defending? Because it sounds like some people were saying, that day's over. That day, that rugged individual, that cowboy stuff. No, that's all, whatever. It's like people are saying, hey, let's celebrate the demise of whatever it is that we called uniquely American. Not that Americans were perfect, but, we had a position in the world, and maybe we got there through deceit and through, wars and all kinds of bad things, right? But we had a position in the world where people were like, yeah, it's pretty cool to be an American. We were very, no, I'll leave it at that. It almost seems like all the other cultures should be celebrated, but this thing that we would call what made us uniquely American, dysfunctions and all, that doesn't seem like something that anybody wants to defend. And if you dare say that you want to defend it, then they'll call you a Nazi. They'll put you right in line with those idiots with the tiki torches, which I don't agree with at all. So, do you see where, from our point of view, how it seems like, it is possible to like whatever was uniquely American for years and years without being, a retrograde kind of a racist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I lived overseas for a couple years. I lived in the Dominican Republic for a couple years. I went over there with this narrative that, everybody wants to come to the United States. And I don't know that that's so true. I mean, there are people
right.
who definitely want to come here because it represents possibility and something much greater than what they have wherever they are. But I also know, there are millions and hundreds of millions of people on this planet who don't want to come to this little section of the planet because for a lot of the same reasons that we would like to defend, and a whole nother set of reasons that we're kind of ignorant of. My wife's mother is a great example. We brought her here from Bolivia, right? I'm in a mixed race marriage where these are all eye-opening things for me of going through the institutions of immigration, like with my wife, and having to hold her hand while they're calling her an alien. Like, how demeaning is that? The language that's being used to enforce these ideas of superiority were really tough for me to swallow, and to know I'm part of the engine that made those, that created those words, used those words to create these policies, and so getting my wife here and going through that with her to where she becomes initially she wasn't a citizen, she was just a legal, what was the term, a resident alien. I still was married to an alien. That became my joke. Hey, I'm married to this alien, so I married an alien. Like that, it became funny, but at some level I'm like, what the this is really messed up.
Yeah.
And then we made the mistake. It took us 7 years to try to get her mother here because we thought we could just do it on a tourist visa. 7 years that we spent hundreds of dollars for applications and filling things out. And the reality was we don't let poor black people into this country on tourist visas.
Wow.
We just don't.
Wow.
She had to go apply for her U.S. citizenry. Then we reapplied to bring her here as a family member, and that's when we were finally able to get her here.
Okay.
And so this is now in the 8th year of all of this work to get her here. And we planned on her staying for this year. And within 6 to 8 weeks, she was ready to go back home.
Oh, wow.
This was, she was much, much happier being where she was at. What we see in our lens is why wouldn't she want to come here? This is the greatest place in the world.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody.
No, you're right, and I oversimplify it when I say it is. I know Scott Adams, the creator of the Dilbert comics, had this wonderful observation. He says, here's a man who presents himself to two groups of people. One group of people say he's a racist and, whatever bad word you can think, homophobe, he hates people who are Muslim, et cetera, he's terrible to women, et cetera. And another group of people and say, I want to make this guy my president. I don't think he's racist. I don't think he's a homophobe or hates Muslims. And he says he thinks it's confirmation bias that's doing this, because we're watching the same thing and coming to completely different conclusions. So with your background, working with folks that are trying to look for biases like that, would you allow that this is a possibility? Do you see, I know people have hung up on me when I told them I voted for Trump. They just do not want to countenance you. And I can understand. If I thought Trump made fun of a disabled reporter, I would never vote for him in a million years. But I watched that video with Serge Kowalski, and I don't think he was making fun of him. I think he was doing bad physical comedy. It's a move I've seen 100 comics do, trying to imitate a guy backpedaling on a story. But you saw the same thing, and I know people that they'll go to their graves saying, this man made fun of Serge Kowalski. I don't know where the truth of that lies, but I know we're seeing completely different things.
What about his comment about the report, the woman, he made a comment about her period and
Things coming out of,
was that justified?
Megyn Kelly.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was doing with that. If he thought he was being clever, and I don't know. He says he was, it's out of the eyes. I don't know. If he's going to be so stupid as to think that it would be clever to refer to a reporter's period, I wish he were a little smarter than that. And in my opinion, Bill Clinton, he diddled an intern, and he may have done a bunch of other stuff worse. I don't see any huge hue and cry to, string him up. If Trump wants to be crude in a way that a third grader's crude, fine. Just let him push the country in the direction that it's been required to be pushed, because we've gone so far in the opposite direction. That's my opinion. Yeah. And if it takes a blunt instrument like Trump to get it done, I'll take a dozen of him versus the Mitch McConnells and Paul Ryans of the world who'll promise you the world. And then, as C.S. Lewis said, what's the good of virtue without courage? If you don't have courage, virtue doesn't do you any good. You only be virtuous when it doesn't hurt you. And I see Trump as being a guy who has the courage to do the things that other folks haven't done. And I'll take Trump way over any of these guys who promise a good game and who say all the right politically correct stuff. But then when it comes down to it, they'll just say, it's not right, it's not the right time, we'll do it some other time. I'm sick and tired of those guys. I wanted a man of action. So that's why I supported him, even in his crudeness. Even though I wouldn't want him around, my 4 daughters, especially if he's handing out, giving out gifts and then trying to make moves on them. I wouldn't want a guy like that around my daughters. But if that's what it takes to push us in a direction that we've been dearly needing to be pushed, I'm very glad to have somebody like that around. Personal life doesn't matter to me.
I guess I wonder then, what direction is it? Like what?
Direction of small government. Just the fact that I've been listening, we've been driving. We're listening to NPR. We're listening to the discussion on the taxes. I would say, what is it? Maybe 1 out of every 6 coverages of the tax bill describes that the corporate tax rate may be coming down from 35 to 20%. 1 out of 6. If the corporate tax goes from 35 to 20, you're going to see this economy take off like a skyrocket. It happened when JFK did it. It happened when Reagan did it. Nobody's talking about that. That's where I think he's pushing the country in the better direction. I feel like we've been browbeat into being second class because people told us it was good for us. And when people will discover what we can do when we're not hobbling our corporate guys with a 35% tax rate, I think it'll be pretty eye-opening for people. So that's just my opinion.
Well, I think I have a couple other thoughts around that. And any corporation that's been in existence for the last, let's just call it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever you want to put in it, or any new ones that are coming up that are really doing well in terms of their profit and loss statements and their balance sheets. Even with the tax rate at 35%, they've figured out ways to not have to pay it.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know that I agree with you that just...
No, they took it all offshore. We need to repatriate all that. Yeah.
But what do you think? Why would they... Oh, we're just going to willingly give it back if it's down to 20%? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, what
No,
company
just-
would do that? They're beholden to their shareholders.
Sure.
If they can take advantage of a tax loophole, they will.
Well, by making it 20%, they'll incorporate here in America instead of in Ireland.
That's pretty naive, I think, in my opinion.
The government, one thing the government does do well is it sets incentives, and we could argue, I guess, and maybe I'm taking it on trust, but I think going from a 35% to a 20% tax rate is an incentive for people to stay here. I do, and maybe I'm being naive in thinking that.
If it does, then that's a byproduct. But I think there's a lot of as many things. There's a lot of variables that are involved with that. Mm-hmm. And, personally, it's probably going to affect me negatively. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'll get that, I don't know if I'll fit into the right tier for qualifying for whatever is being perceived as a middle-class tax cut. Mm-hmm. I think in general, the way that this is a big statement. Like, mm-hmm. I've always believed since, I first learned about the way the world works, mm-hmm. that national politics, like elected officials, they are the highest priced whore. So all of them, I think, are beholden to whatever company or organization is filling their coffers to get them elected. I mean, statistically, that's just how it works, right? If you look at who raises the most money, they usually win. Yeah. I think that there needs to be some systemic changes to our representative democracy in this country. I think that, that really is our only mechanism for making sure that we have a fair and just society, a more, a place that where everybody can truly benefit, is by focusing in on these rules and how the rules are made, mm-hmm. right? And I believe that people make better decisions than individuals, and that when there are decisions to be made, that we need to have representation from across the board. One of the things that differentiated the Greek government from Roman government was that they had peasants with a seat at the table where the sausage was made. Mm. And we don't have that here, right? We only have high-priced whores that are deciding who gets what. Yeah. And whether it be the tax bill or whether it be Obamacare, I think whatever, if it's a social policy that our federal government is creating, so, any elected official, they have to be the first ones to sign up for it. I mean, I think that that's a fair way to decide. Like, you and your family have to have the health care that you're going to extend to everybody. Mm-hmm. Or if there is none, then you get none. I don't think that, I think that there are ways that you can define the rules of the game that will then lead to more equitable outcomes. That's a firm belief that I have.
That's a fantastic way to put it. Thank you so much. Thanks for sitting down with us. That's a great way to end.
All right.
That was Matt Cahill in San Francisco. I'd like to thank him for sharing his experiences about immigration, capitalism, and the Trump presidency. I hope you consider supporting this series by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks.